Welcome back. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to deal with rejection and resubmission today. Specifically, I want to discuss with you the different types of journal decision, and I want to talk to you about what kind of letter you will receive from the editor explaining these types of decision. This will help you when you receive a letter from the editor to kind of decode what he's saying to you and to determine what you should do next in your publication process. Now, the first type of possible decision that the editor will make is called pure accept. A pure accept means that the editor will email you and say, "I love your paper. We've been waiting for your paper our whole lives. We will publish it right away. Thank you." This almost never happens. And the reason I want to tell you this is because sometimes students, particularly, believe that this is possible or even likely that the editor will accept their paper with no changes. And honestly, I have been working in this field for the last 15 years with hundreds of students and literally thousands of papers through my company, and I have never heard of this happening. I have seen many major revisions, minor revisions, but I've never seen a paper accepted with no changes whatsoever. So, if this happens to you, take a picture of the letter and send it to me, because I want to see one of these letters before I die, and I hope I can. But it's not very likely that it will happen. Basically, the best decision we can hope for is to revise minor problems and resubmit. Now, minor problems are things like adding references, defining terms, developing a conclusion. These are easy fixes that are fast for us to make, quick decision, easy things for us to do. Now, we know that they're minor because the editor usually also gives us a very short time to make these revisions. Long time probably means he expects that we need a long time to make all these major revisions. A shorter time, he may even tell us a publication date that he hopes to publish our article. That's very good news for us. That's a very positive sign. And I would suggest working as fast as we can to make those minor revisions. Get it back to the journal before the editor forgets that he likes us, before the reviewers forget their happy feelings about us. Just work hard to get that minor revision paper back to the journal just as soon as you possibly can. The next type of decision is to revise major problems and resubmit. Now, this could be a lot of work, depending on what those major revisions are. In my experience, our chance of publication for a major revision is about 50%. Now, that's a lot better than 11%, which is the chance that we have in the beginning when we submit before any review. But it's still 50-50. We have to work hard here to show the reviewers we're doing everything we can to make them happy, and we need to prove that we are answering every single one of their comments. Then we have rejected but can resubmit. Now, this is a rare kind of decision, an interesting decision, where the editor will close the door but leave it open a little bit. And sometimes we can squeeze our body in there and still try to submit to that same rejecting journal. I'll give you some examples of this type of decision later on. But sometimes the journal editor may believe that you still have some potential, even though the reviewers don't like you. So he will say something like, "If you make the major revisions, I will send it to new reviewers." I've seen that before. Sometimes the editor believes that we don't want to make the major revision because it's just too big. And so he will reject us, but if we insist on trying, he will give us a second chance. And in this type of situation, we may even need to ask the editor in a letter, "Can I try again?" Or, "Are you sure I can't try again?" And sometimes he will allow us to. Again, I'll show you some of the language in an editor's letter from a real case so you can see what I'm talking about later on. Then we have rejected. Rejected means the reviewers don't like you and the editor agrees, and you cannot try again there. And then we have rejected by editor. Now, the good thing about being rejected by the editor is it's very fast, usually, maybe 1 week, and you can then submit your paper to another journal. The bad thing about being rejected by the editor is usually there are no reviewer comments that we can use to revise our paper before we send it to a new journal. And I talked about in an earlier video that being rejected by the editor doesn't necessarily mean that the quality of your research is bad. It could just be that for other reasons, like the journal is full and he doesn't have the room to publish you. Let me show you an example letter from an editor for a major revision. And I'm going to draw your attention to some keywords in this letter that help us to understand what it is that the editor is thinking. Enclosed, please find the reviewer's report on your paper. One reviewer has minor recommendations for revision, but the other has fairly substantial. There's that word, substantial. Substantial means big. Big changes, major. Substantial recommendations. Although their reports are very positive about your paper, they also include helpful suggestions for improving the paper, especially regarding this. Now, here's a key thing. Whenever the editor says something, especially regarding, we know that that's important not only to the reviewer, but also to the editor. And you should never forget, the editor is really your customer, not the reviewers. The reviewers are like advisors to the editor, but the decision maker is always the editor himself. And whenever the editor pays particular attention in his letter to some concern, you should pay double concern to that as well, because that's important not only to the reviewers, but also to that editor. Because of the reviewer's concerns, I cannot accept the paper in its present form. I can offer, however, to send a revised version of the paper back to the second reviewer, should you wish to rework your arguments substantially in line with these reports and resubmit the paper. I'm sorry to have to convey what I know will be disappointing news, but I do feel strongly that with careful revision, this essay could be accepted for publication in our journal. Now, this is a pretty good letter because really only one reviewer needs to be satisfied. The other one's okay, only minor revisions. He's only going to ask the second reviewer to really look at this in detail, and we're going to pay particular attention to this concern that the editor pointed out in his letter to us as well. Here's another letter, also for a major revision. I am sorry to have to return your manuscript because it falls outside our guidelines. However, we would like to invite you to resubmit your article. In order to conform to our guidelines, you would need to formulate your article to clarify your thesis and resituate the piece within a more scholarly background. So the editor mentions two concerns that he has specifically. So we're going to pay particular attention to those as well, since he mentioned them in his letter to us. There are other concerns in the reviewer comments, of course, but these two are particularly important. We want to thank you for considering our journal. We look forward to hearing from you. Here's another major revision letter from the journal editor. Enclosed, please find the reviewer's reports on your paper. They agree that you have a very promising idea, but that serious revision is necessary. In particular, they would like to see this. Now, remember, whenever the editor says something particularly, we will look at that particularly too. Given their concerns, I cannot accept the paper for publication in its current form. Should you feel able to address our concerns and submit a substantially revised version of the paper, I would be happy to ask the reviewers to read the paper again. Now, the next type of decision that I want to look at is the rejected but can resubmit. Now, as I discussed before, this is often where editors still see some potential even though the reviewers don't. And he wants to give you the possibility to try to revise yourself. Let me show you an example of this type of letter, and language rather, in the letter. The editor may say, unacceptable in its current form, would be more suitable as a brief report. Here's an example letter. Given the reviewer's reports, we cannot accept your paper for publication. Should you choose to revise the paper thoroughly, according to the reviewer's substantial means a lot, handa, substantial recommendations, and submit it again to us, we will send it to new reviewers. So we're kind of beginning from zero with new reviewers. But maybe this is good. I mean, if the old reviewers don't like you, maybe you really want new reviewers, so this could be a positive thing, depending on how you want to look at it. Here's another example of this type of decision. Although the reviewers thought the article was strong, they have noted some serious flaws that must be addressed before the article is publishable. Please see the attached for the reviewer's suggestions. Now, in this case, the editor did not invite us to resubmit. So what we did is we actually emailed the editor and said, can we resubmit? And the editor said, yes, you can. However, I don't think you want to, because the reviewer is asking you to do so much dirty work that it's probably not worth it. This is what the editor was thinking, which is why he didn't invite us to resubmit. And in this case, actually, the student agreed. It was too much dirty work to do, and so we submitted to a different journal. But it goes to show you we could have tried if we had wanted to. The editor was leaving the door open for us. Here's another example of the rejected but can resubmit. I regret to inform you that our reviewers have considered your paper, but unfortunately feel it is unsuitable for publication in the Journal of. For your information, I attach the reviewer comments at the bottom of this email. I hope you will find them to be constructive and helpful. You are, of course, now free to submit the paper elsewhere, should you choose to do so. Here's where it gets interesting. You can also resubmit your manuscript to this journal after major revisions. If you decide to do so, please clearly identify the revision in your cover letter. Thank you for considering our journal. I hope the outcome of this specific submission will not discourage you from submitting future manuscripts. So the journal says you're rejected, but you can try again, and you're going to need to show us exactly what you have fixed. Here is some language that we see for the rejection. Now, rejection means you have no second chance. The editor really thinks you need to go to a new journal, and he's not interested in this paper at all. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because sometimes hopeful students will read a letter from the editor, and they will not see that they are rejected because they are so hopeful. Maybe the editor is too polite, too nice, and because he's so nice, we don't know we're dead even though we're dead. So even if the editor is very nice, if you see these sentences in your rejection letter, you really don't have a second chance. Like this one, submit to another journal. Unsuitable for our readership. Insufficient priority at this time. Relevant to a more specialized audience. Although of interest to our readers, fundamental flaws in the study design preclude publication. We do not accept unsolicited review articles. Is not publishable. Is not ready for publication. Cannot be published at this time. Now, one student in my class, he said, "Teacher, cannot be published at this time, but next time, yes." Unfortunately, the editor means all the time when he says this for this paper. Here's a rejection letter. I'm sorry to return your article, but our submission guidelines require that articles reveal something new and demonstrate a thorough grasp of previous criticism on the topic. Your submission lacks this dimension, and therefore we cannot consider it further at this time or any time. Here's another example. Thank you for offering us your manuscript. We have read it with interest, but regret that we cannot accept it for publication. We hope that the attached reader report provides helpful advice as you revise your paper for publication in another journal. If you're rejected by the editor, strangely, I've read a lot of articles that have been rejected by the editor, and he always says good luck or best of luck. I don't know why, because clearly we have no luck, but he says this. Usually the letter is very short, He will say something like, "Thank you, but no thank you. Good luck. Goodbye." The good thing is it's very fast. And as I said, don't get too concerned about this, because the reason he's rejected it may have nothing to do with the quality of your research. He may just have too many articles or may not like your topic for some reason, but your research may be very good. So just quickly move on to the next journal that you have in mind. One other reason that the editor may not give you the reviewer reports. Sometimes the reviewer's reports are very, very negative and hostile, and he doesn't want to break your heart as the author. So to protect your little heart from getting broken, he will not give you all of the reviewer comments. My advice is be thankful he is protecting you from the comments. If the comments were helpful, he would send them to you. Because they're just so negative, so mean, part of his job is to shelter you from seeing those. Don't ask to see them, just move on to another journal. Well, for more information, I want to direct you to my website, editing.tw. We revise research papers for Taiwanese scholars. We also have a blog, editing.tw/blog, where I have other videos and articles that will be very interesting for you to read if you're trying to publish your research. I've written several books that you can buy at my website, textbooks.tw. I've also republished books by great authors from North America, from England, who deal specifically with how we can better publish research papers. So to see more detail on those books that we have published and written, please visit our site, textbooks.tw. Thank you for joining us.